Welcome back to the show, everybody, to another episode of Sit Around the Fire. I'm really honored and delighted to sit down with Jeff Wenninger, who is here to bring his very unique perspective of having spent 33 years as an officer and what his movement in the work that he's doing now. So welcome to the show, Jeff.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my tagline first question for my guest is always, to the individual who's listening to our episode today, what would you like them to walk away with as the most important thing that you want to address or speak to today?
Well, whenever I have any speaking engagement or I'm on a podcast or even the live news broadcast, I like the people listening to walk away feeling enlightened and have a sense of empowerment and actually feel hopeful for the future of law enforcement. So regardless of the topic that I'm speaking about in regards to law enforcement and my experiences during my 33 years, that's the goal that I have, is to have people walk away with those three things in mind.
Yeah, awesome. The enlightenment side is right up my cup of tea. So I'm really happy to hear that that's one of your passions as well. Well, let's dive into a little bit of who you are so that our audience, the people, can understand a little bit better of who's speaking to them today and give them some insight into how our conversation is going to unfold.
Okay. Well, I'm a very unique individual. It starts way back at the very beginning for me. I was born to a teenage mother, and she put me up for adoption, and I was adopted by my parents. My father was a sociology professor at Kent State in Ohio. Probably heard of Four Dead in Ohio. That's where the National Guard in May 4th, 1970, shot and killed four students and injured another nine. My father was present for that and witnessed it, actually. But that's where I grew up. And my parents, they wanted four children, each 1 year apart. And they were married for a number of years trying, and that's why they said, let's look into adoption. And as life often has it, at the point that they were being approved for adoption, my mother became pregnant with my oldest sister. And they still wanted the four children. They said, let's follow through with the adoption. So they had my sister, then they adopted me, then they adopted my brother, who's half Japanese, and then I had a foster sister in the family who's Black. And I was raised in the 60s and 70s in the Midwest, Kent, Ohio. And that experience in and of itself gave me a different lens in which I looked at my experiences, not only growing up, but in my professional career in law enforcement. And so it's with that I brought to my profession in law enforcement a whole different mindset on how I viewed race in law enforcement. And also growing up, I was an elite athlete. I was a hockey player. I played Division I collegiate ice hockey on scholarship. Played in the United States Hockey League. And if not for some significant injuries, I probably would have had a fairly formidable professional career. And I brought that dedication and commitment and all those hard-earned lessons that I had from my athletic background into law enforcement as well. So it's those sorts of things that are kind of unique to me that molded who I was in my career. And it gives everybody a better understanding of why I view things the way I do and why I have some of the suggestions in regards to what I think law enforcement needs to do moving forward to be successful.
Wow. I mean, as hearing you talk about your growing up in the diversity within your own family, let alone you mentioned in the 60s and 70s, is like that just had to have given you such a unique human perspective of and being adopted. Like you come with such a diverse background, like you said, that you get so many different angles and perspectives at it. What inspired you to go into law enforcement? But where was your heart when you made that decision?
Well, listen, I wasn't one of those people that grew up wanting to be a police officer. That was the furthest thing from my mind. I entered college, like I said, on a hockey scholarship, and I was a finance major. And that's what I was until an evening when I was 19 years old. And I went out to a bar with a hockey buddy of mine, and we closed the bar. And when we were leaving, all the students were flooding out of the bar onto this narrow sidewalk, which was not designed to hold us all. So we flowed out into the street, and there's this car full of some nice looking young ladies. And my buddy thought he'd be cute, and he propped himself up on the hood. And the young lady driving the car didn't think that was very funny. So when she slammed on the brakes, he fell off and he grabbed the antenna of the car, which I'm kind of dating myself because it was on that's back when they were on the hood, and he snapped it off. And there was a police officer up the street who saw this occur. So he came down, grabbed my buddy, put handcuffs on him, and threw him in the back seat of his police car. And I'm like, well, okay, I need to find out, where are they taking him, how long it's going to take them to process him, and how much money am I going to need to get him out of jail. So I approached the police officer, and he was immediately belligerent with me. And he basically said, get back up on the sidewalk or you're going to jail as well. And I understood that. So I got back up on the sidewalk, but he had called for backup and two police officers showed up. And it should have been a clue when he pointed to me and they walked over. But one of them was a sergeant. And I thought, well, okay, this sergeant's going to bring some common sense to this incident. And I couldn't have been more wrong. He confronts me and he's also very belligerent. And he asked me for my driver's license. And as I'm reaching for it, he begins to strike me with his fists and his feet and his baton. And it wasn't long before I had a split chin and I was handcuffed in the backseat of a police car going down to the city jail. And I was booked for disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, and interfering in official business. And I'm like, I had done nothing wrong. And what was crazy about it is after I'd gotten down to the jail, I said, well, where's my buddy? I said, oh, we let him go. So I thought, my buddy conducted himself in a way that initiated this entire engagement with the police. They let him go, and I go to jail for asking a simple question: where are you taking him? How long is it going to take? And how much is going to cost for me to get him out of jail? So I ended up spending my entire summer's earnings on an attorney, and I refused to take any of the plea deals. And I took it all the way to jury trial, at which time I showed up and they said, if you sign this ticket, which is basically like a jaywalking ticket, and pay a $60 fine, we'll drop all charges. And that's what I ended up doing. And that caused me to want to start taking some criminal justice classes just from that experience alone. And it really resonated with me. So I took criminal justice classes, took sociology classes, and as well as psychology classes. And it all was very interesting to me. And as life often has it, crazy things occur. About a year and a half later, the same agency that arrested me had an advertisement in the newspaper for correction officers to work in the very jail that I was in. And kind of half-heartedly, I applied. I got hired. I mean, that was like the ultimate exoneration of any wrongdoing.
My
I got
gosh.
hired by the agency that actually arrested me. So I decided I wanted to follow my father into academia because he was a sociology professor. I wanted to be a professor of criminal justice. And when I was just about to start my PhD, he said, listen, you need to go get about 5 years of practical experience as a police officer. It'll make your studies much more rewarding and it'll make you a much more credible professor. So that's why I went to Los Angeles with the intention of staying no more than 5 years. And 33 years, 4 months later, I retired.
Wow, that is crazy. I mean, it's almost ironic. I wish I could see, like, some of those officers' face when you popped in and you're like, "I'm here to apply for this position." As the kid they just did all this shenanigan to. It's
You know, I
actually pretty brilliant.
I even I actually learned to like them all. I mean, even the sergeant that beat me, he had a very keen sense of humor, and I learned to like the guy. He did explain to me that as police officers, we're concerned whenever we're addressing a large group of college students because it can escalate quickly, and if you're perceived as being a troublemaker, we have to get you out of there and all that. And I understood and I accepted it at the time, but really, that's basically just the first explanation of utilizing the end justifies the means type of scenario or rationale for doing things that are inappropriate. Because truth be told, the force that was used against me was not appropriate, nor were the charges.
Yeah, and that kind of segues into my next question was now have a very unique specialty in that you work with a lot of these like forced kind of force of use scenarios, or when they come up and you're often seen as the expert and kind of whether it's doing a criminal or a civil investigation with it, or you mentioned like even doing some internal investigation when these force of use come up. So, how did you get into that specifically, or was that kind of a passion of yours that started to develop kind of based off of your own story?
No, actually, when I was still a policeman prior to promoting to sergeant, I worked Metropolitan Division of the LAPD, which is essentially the special forces. That's where they house SWAT and K-9 and the mounted unit. And I worked a line platoon there. And when I promoted to sergeant, that was when there was the Rampart scandal, the Rafael Perez scandal, where there were officers that were committing bank robberies off duty, stealing pounds of cocaine out of evidence lockup and selling it on the street for personal financial gain, planting guns and officer-involved shooting incidents to justify the shootings. I mean, some of the most egregious corruption that you can imagine was going on in the LAPD out of Rampart Division. And I was sent there as a sergeant, as part of the new team that was going to change the culture. And after being there for a period of time, I was then selected to run the new gang unit. It was called the Gang Enforcement Detail, because as a result of the corruption, they disbanded all of the crash units. That's Crime Resources Against Street Hoodlums, which is the gang unit at the time. They disbanded them at every geographic division citywide, but we still needed an entity within the organization that addressed violent gang crime. So that's where they created the Gang Enforcement Detail that had an entirely different hierarchy and structure of reporting up the chain of command. And I was chosen to be the officer in charge of that unit. I did that for 3 years. And that's back when William Bratton was our chief of police. Prior to coming to the LAPD, he was the commissioner of NYPD. He's essentially, he's a rock star of police chiefs. And I kind of was noticed on how I ran the unit. I changed the culture there. I changed the measures of effectiveness, the mindset of the officers, but we had a lot of successes and we thought outside the box. And I changed some of the standards in which we looked at ourselves and judged ourselves by. And the unit ultimately was recognized with the meritorious unit citation for our effectiveness and reduction of violent gang crime. And from there, I then went to go work directly for Bratton, where I briefed him on all officer-involved shootings and lethal force cases. And I wrote his rationale for the adjudication of all those cases that's submitted to the Honorable Board of Police Commissioners, who are the ultimate adjudicators of those cases. So that's how I kind of fell into it. And I did that for Chief Bratton, and then his successor, Charlie Beck. When he was chief, I did that for him. And then I went over to the investigative side, where I became the officer in charge of the detective entity that investigates all those cases. So for a number of years, like 12 plus years, I had my hands in all of the critical use of force cases in the LAPD, in excess of 700 cases. So I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Wow. So, with your 33 years on and kind of how you've been involved in all these special areas and especially these use of force incidents, you mentioned like over 700 cases. That's a lot. What are some of the moments that challenged your own beliefs about policing, and how did these moments like start to change your own perspective on policing and what this looks like, and kind of how, I mean, like, just what did you think about it after all of this?
Well, really, throughout my entire career, all 33 years of my career, I was trying to reimagine policing. In other words, I was always trying to find a way to do things better. So when I worked for Bratton, I rewrote the adjudication standards for the officer-involved shootings and lethal force cases. I created a debrief model to where the substantially involved personnel in these critical incidents were placed together at training division and would debrief the incident and talk about the things that they did well that they want to emulate again in the future in the event they have a similar circumstance. But we also wanted to identify the things that we could do better so we don't make the same mistakes again. Now you say, well, that's common sense. But the way the old LAPD was doing up to that time was they didn't touch the case until it was adjudicated up to a year later. So you had circumstances where you had somebody involved in an incident, making mistakes that were in violation of department policy, but it was never addressed. And before that year was up and that case was adjudicated, they had a similar case and did the exact same thing. So these are the types of things that I was always working on trying to do to improve the organization and to improve our ability to respond to these critical incidents and have a more optimal outcome. I even looked at what's called contagious fire or sympathetic fire for police officers, and it changed the qualification course of fire. We qualify every other month, and we never, prior to it being changed, we never had an assessment element in that qualification course. And what I mean by that is we would have everybody lined up on the firing line and be ready on the left, ready on the right, all ready on the firing line. When the targets turn, attention, then they would turn and everybody starts firing. We're programming our minds to fire when everybody else is firing without any independent thought. So what we built into it was you may have a no-shoot target. So you have to first determine on whether it's appropriate for you to shoot or not. So it was those sorts of things that we tried to implement in our training to improve our ability to perform maximally out in the field when it matters most, when we're talking about making split-second decisions in rapidly unfolding tactical situations. And that's the kind of stuff that I was always involved in. And it was tough at times because you get a lot of pushback. Law enforcement can be very insular. They don't like change. There's oftentimes a mentality of many that they can do no wrong. And this is where I brought in my athletic background. If you're not willing to look at what you're doing wrong or what you did that caused your team to lose that particular game, whether you're in hockey or in football, you're in basketball, then you're never going to have a winning organization. And there's probably no organization more critical that it'd be a winning organization than in law enforcement. And when I mean winning, it's most appropriately responding to these incidents and having the most optimal outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm laughing inside as I hear you talk about the culture of law enforcement, and I have to say, from my seat as on the mental health professional side, they're one of the most challenging groups to work with for sure, individuals to work with, because I thought I was hard headed and stubborn, but man, there is something really special about how stubborn they can be. But I also have to say, like, they have an incredibly big heart, and like they're really incredible people. So like I laugh because I can resonate with that and understand it totally from this spot. So it's funny.
Unfortunately, in law enforcement, and this is one of the main flaws in law enforcement is we're not really brought to understand how what we see on a regular basis, we're not programmed to see. And we're not even recognizing how it's impacting us. And it evolves over time to where it becomes normalized. And the, grumpiness, the inability to sleep, the poor eating habits, perhaps drinking too much, becoming isolated, those sorts of things cause it to spiral even further. And then most agencies don't even have resources available for their personnel. And even today, those that do, you still have a stigma attached to you if you use those resources. And we've come a long way in law enforcement, but there's a long way to go. Because it doesn't always take a critical incident where you're shot at or you get shot or you see somebody killed. It doesn't have to be that to cause you trauma. There's many people that I know that it's just their mug gets full. It's full of sadness because we deal with sadness every day. People don't call us because they're having a great day. They're calling us because they're having the worst day of their life. And that can wear on you over the years. And if you're not self-aware and in tune to the things that you need to be doing to ensure that you're staying in a healthy place, then it can catch up with you. And then I've got a number of friends, they were fine until they're retired and it just hits them like a ton of bricks. Or they during their careers, something just triggers it and they get diagnosed with PTSD, but they're not in a place where they're able to come forward and say that. and they feel guilty because they may not feel that they've done anything in their career that warrants them to feel the way that they do. But that's just a statement made out of naivety and not understanding how they're being impacted by the things they see on a daily basis.
Yeah, you bring up so many good points and so valid to the whole conversation because I see this a lot as well of people worried about their job or being passed over for a promotion because somebody found out they are going to see a therapist or they're working on their mental health and being questioned on whether their mental stability warrants them a promotion or just it's just baffling to me about how we just don't support the organizations don't support what officers, first responders really need. And there is still such a stigma with it, even though it has gotten a lot better for sure. But I would say one of the things that I see a lot, and I'm curious as to your take on this, is we get really good at not putting ourselves as a priority. Like we've signed the oath, we put on the badge, and it becomes this badge of honor where we think, well, I'm signed up to put everyone else before me. I'm literally putting my life on the line to go take care of others. And then that begins to become the narrative throughout life is that we know we don't put ourselves as a priority. We don't think either things aren't bad enough yet or we don't deserve to do this, or like you mentioned, nothing has happened that warrants me to go. But I'm wondering what your take is on that of like people just not making themselves a priority and kind of being the overgiver and really sucked into that identity as I'm the one that takes care of everyone else or I'm the one that fixes everyone else's problems. I show up for everyone else, but I'm not willing to show up for myself.
Well, that is really the reality. There's probably a personality trait that you'll find in most police officers that they view themselves as the fixers. And that's why people call them to fix this situation. But oftentimes we're not very good at fixing our own stuff. And we carry that burden on our shoulders and we don't even acknowledge it. And but we tend to get even more insular then. We surround ourselves by the people that think like we do. Um, and here, have another beer. It's that's the solution, and it's not. Um, and it's unfortunate. And the thing about it is we also have to understand, like even if you saw the most critical incident. Well, for instance, when I ran the Rampart Gang Unit, my officers would get in an officer-involved shooting, and there was there was one in particular that was very, challenging to deal with. And the reality is it's not just the officer that was looking down the barrel of a gun that has trauma, or his particular partners that were with him that day. It's everybody in the unit. It's everybody working that division. It's their supervisor because I'm responsible for my people and I love my people. And to not be able to send them home safely is a failure of my own in my mind. But then what do? You then go home and you either choose to share or not share what has gone on any given day. If you choose not to share, that's probably a problem because you're internalizing everything. If you do share, you've just created what? A secondary trauma. And over time, that can build. So you not only have the initial primary trauma that the officers may be experiencing, but they bring it home. And then it can cause relationship issues. And then if you have children, you have the breakdown of the family, financial issues when you have to, you split up and you're paying for two homes. And it compounds. And that's the reality. So we have to understand very early on, we need to be talking about this stuff in the academy. What is it that you need to be doing and understand of yourself early on before you even step into this career to know these are the healthy things you need to be doing. And that's one thing I was so fortunate. I had my father, he was a sociology professor. He did his PhD dissertation on law enforcement. He probably knew better than I what I was stepping into when I chose to go into law enforcement. And he was a great sounding board. And the one thing he always emphasized is the vast majority of your friends and people you interact with outside of work should not have anything to do with law enforcement. And that helps you maintain a perspective that's healthy. It helps you be balanced in your attitudes, because one thing we oftentimes don't recognize is that our attitudes and beliefs, which are impacted by who we surround ourselves by, right? They will impact our actions and behaviors, not only, on the job, but off the job. So that's why it's so important that we ensure that we're interacting with people that have differing opinions than the guy who's going to be sitting next to you in the patrol car, or the female that you work with and investigating a particular crime or whatever it may be. You have to expose yourself to people that will give you a different perspective to look at things through. And I was fortunate. I had my father that helped me realize that. And then it was very important. You have to stay fit. You have to get your sleep. You have to make sure you're physically fit. My parents were both marathon runners, and they worked out and they modeled that for me my entire life. Having been an athlete, I enjoyed working out. I was always challenging my body for the highest level of performance in my sport. So that wasn't unusual for me. But listen, how many police officers do we see that are not physically fit? And that vast majority of police departments have zero physical fitness standards beyond the academy. And those are things that all need to change. So, I mean, I know I'm rambling, but there's so many different things we can talk about in law enforcement where we fail our law enforcement officers and allow them to go down these dark holes because we're not equipping them to be successful in what we know they're going to have to confront and encounter during a career.
Yeah, I think the conversation is so valuable and it aligns with my mission to end the suffering. And it's just, there's so much pain and suffering in this culture, not just police, but police, fire, everybody, first responder wise, it's pretty similar. But there is a massive amount of pain and suffering, and we don't realize like how that is drastically impacting us, and it's impacting our families, it's impacting the people that in our communities that we're meant to serve. And so I I echo everything that you're saying, and I think it's so important to take accountability, I think, and to advocate for yourself and realize, like, you mentioned so much about balance, which I think is what a lot of us have fallen into, that trap of losing yourself in the identity of the job, of the uniform, and your whole friend group becomes exactly what you are. That's all you talk about at home, if you talk at home at all. Like, everything becomes that is your, Jeff the cop or Ashley the firefighter or whatever. It's like that's your whole identity. But what we don't realize is that, like, that can be gone quicker than you know it, for one. And for two, that's not really who you are. And you have to have that balance in that. Like, eh, in order to have a healthy career, in my opinion, you have to have the balance. Otherwise, this job will eat you up, chew you up, and spit you out on the other side and not really give two shits about it when it's done. Is like, you're not going to have this left for you when you're done, but you're going to destroy every other aspect of your life, including yourself. And it's just needing to take accountability for that and saying, like, I want to have a healthy career and I want to have a healthy retirement. So speak to us a little bit about, now that you're retired and you're on this mission, you have a new mission moving forward, but tell us how did it go for you moving from being, on duty online to retirement, and that transition of coming out of everything that you knew for 33 years and now into this new season of life where you are?
It's not kind of actually interesting because people often say, well, you did your 33 years, you're retired now. I actually look at it as my internship. I now just know what I know. And I am now have the foundation and the ability to, with wisdom, move forward and have a real impact. Because, during my career, unfortunately, I would say probably a handful of people that I directly knew that committed suicide, and they're all police officers. One was a murder suicide. They're both police officers. Another one, he took his life after he found out his wife was having an affair, and another one killed himself after he was going through a divorce, and he was shared what he was feeling with a therapist, and he then joined what was called the rubber gun squad, where they took his gun out of concern for liability the city may have because of things that he shared, and that humiliation pushed him over the edge. So these are things that I had to experience growing up through the LAPD organization, and it made it very real to me. This isn't something I'm talking about hypothetically. It's something I know about. And listen, I'm not um, embarrassed to say that there's times since I've retired that I struggle with some stuff, not because of anything more than just the sadness of my career at times was a lot, and the reality that I was exposed to in my understanding of things. People will ask me, if you could do it again, would you do it? And the answer is yes. However, I sometimes wish that I was a little naive and didn't know the realities of so much. So moving forward, it's not only about having a police framework and blueprint to hold police more accountable and be more successful moving forward, but it's about building the trust with the communities that we work with and that we actually work for, because that can help us. The better relationship we have with the community, the more supported we're going to feel. This them versus us serves nobody well. But unfortunately, that is the theme all too often. And really, we need to be talking about the well being of the officers who serve and protect the communities that they serve. So when I'm consulting law enforcement agencies, it's not something as simple as just looking at your policies and procedures. It's really a cultural transition that has to occur. Because I've always said it's what I call the policy practice divide. It doesn't matter what your policies say on paper if your culture is not aligned with those policies and procedures. Every single time, culture will win out over policy and procedure. So you have to ensure that your culture is supportive of your officers and has their well-being in mind, and that the actual well-being of the organization doesn't occur unless the well-being of the people actually doing the job every day out there on the streets is your top priority. So that's what I try to evolve to be one in my consulting services. And it also goes into the training and ensuring that our people are prepared, that not only prepared for the stress that they're going to be under and the things they're going to see, but that they can actually perform well and be competent in the areas of proficiency that they need to be. I've always said this: you're not paid for what you do on a daily basis as a police officer. You're paid for what, God forbid, you might have to do. And if you're not proficient in all of these various multifaceted areas, then you're not earning your paycheck. So I hope that answers your question. It's a real complex. I speak just on this topic for a 4-hour block of instruction, but there's so much that falls under the umbrella of this topic.
Yeah, one of the things you spoke to that I really appreciated was the cultural side of things. And I think that's absolutely spot on is if you don't change the culture, your policies really don't mean much of anything because from my seat, where I see it is like when people come in to see me, they're talking about stuff that's going on at work, obviously, but there's so much interpersonal struggle or dynamic that's causing so many of these issues to show up as I've asked the question is like, what is your sergeant doing about this? Or what is your lieutenant like? Is there any and it's like, no, like they're just not really doing much about it. Or like it's a misfabricated form of discipline that comes down on people because and I'm like, does nobody realize about like what's happening with number one, the individual and where they are in their life? Because I think that's grossly under evaluated is when somebody's job performance is slipping or they're not, going out and doing as many calls or seeking things out, is like nobody's asking the question, what's going on with this person? Like, what's happening outside of work? Or are they feeling insecure, not confident in their skills and abilities? And that's why they're not going out and seeking, the bad guys, for lack of a better way to say it. But it just seems there's a huge disconnect between that element of it and leadership or people in higher positions making these decisions. So I'm wondering, like, what do when you do your consulting and you have, your trainings, what are you saying to the leadership side of things? Because this is, I really believe it's a huge part of the puzzle when it comes to enacting change on a more global level. But what do you say to these people in leadership who are probably on a lot of levels just as unhealthy as everyone else, but then trying to make these decisions and then like just creating this very toxic culture?
Well, first and foremost, leadership is critical, and it's probably the most critical thing. But the one thing that you oftentimes hear from police executives is when you make a decision, the most important thing you have to think about is what impact will it have on the organization. And unfortunately, they differentiate between the individual employee or the rank and file and the organization. They're one and the same. So I suggest that if you're taking care of your people, you are then therefore by default taking care of your organization, and quit trying to protect your organization. Unfortunately, all too often, police executives make decisions based on what's politically expedient versus what is right. Because what is right is oftentimes something difficult to stand up for, supporting an employee that needs your help. It's a lot easier just to discard them. And really, people that suffer the most in law enforcement, research shows that it's those that feel that the organization has been disloyal to them, turn their back on them. And those are the people that really struggle the most, because we all go into this career believing we're family. We're here to look after each other. And unfortunately, in most organizations, that is the furthest thing from the truth. So that is one thing that I emphasize. The other thing is bring diverse opinions to the table when you're making a decision about anything. Don't make your decision in isolation with groupthink. Look for alternative perspectives and listen, not to respond, but to hear what's being said and to understand, and allow yourself to be objective and open to somebody changing your mind. That takes courage. That's what my book is really all about, On Thin Ice. It's the courage to have the difficult conversations and to have the insight to invite people that have conflicting opinions with you to the table, because it's then and only then will you be able to navigate a true successful path forward. And those are the things that I really emphasize. That's just kind of the broad brush explanation, but my book gets into the nuts and bolts of it.
Awesome. No, I think you're spot on with it. And I my heart just warms up because I can see how passionate that you are about this, and like I love it when people get a fire lit within them and they really come into their mission and their purpose and things, and I can totally like see that in you, how like this is really important to you. This is a very big deal, and like you mentioned, that was just your academy, your pro B phase of things, and now you're really stepping into the work that you were meant to do, and that's just very awesome to see that from this side. So I lift you up and support you and encourage you because it will have such a big impact. And yeah, we all just want people to live healthy lives and to enjoy life really and find the good that's out there. So well done with that. I just wanted to throw that out there because it was awesome to see it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So I want to tap into and mention a little bit about what you're doing in terms of helping equip officers with education and how important it is to, like we mentioned before, being well-rounded and diverse. And I think it helps us create more balance and harmony within our lives too. But can you talk to us a little bit about what you're doing with work with the scholarship and why this is important to you and how people can connect or maybe get involved within that you're doing?
Certainly. Well, first, I think it's important that people understand my book. And basically, my book, I share my personal background because it's unique. We spoke a bit about that earlier. Talk about my professional experiences, my practical insights, and ultimately what I view as the actionable solutions in regards to a successful path forward for law enforcement moving forward to the 21st century. And with that, I am promoting a $30,000 undergraduate and graduate level scholarship, 15,000 for both, because you have to write 1,000 to 1,500 word essay. And it's really about an essay in regards to your perspective into what needs to be done to strengthen police accountability. How do we build community trust? And then ultimately, how do we support the well-being of those officers that are serving the communities? And it's through that I'm looking for people's personal insight and personal experiences. And I'm looking for the same thing that you said you appreciated in me. I want some passion. And it's open to every study area. You don't have to be a criminal justice professor. You can be an art major. And why is that? Because it doesn't matter what your academic background is. Your opinions are just as important as a criminal justice major. So that doesn't matter. And really, I am a huge advocate for education. I put my money where my mouth is. This is $30,000 of my own money. I'm a civil servant on a civil servant's retirement. It's a lot of money for me, but it's worth it. And that's the kind of legacy that I want to leave. The reality is that if you look at the Nordic countries, how they hire and they train before they even hit the streets as a police officer, they're 2 and 3 year programs that they go through. They earn the equivalent of an undergraduate degree before they take their first action as a police officer. Where here in the United States, there is no national standard for the length of a police academy. But on the average, it's about 800 hours. Let's put that in the context. To apply for your cosmetology license, you need 1,500 hours of training, nearly twice that of a police officer. If that doesn't ring true that we need to fix something, I don't know what will. And the reality is all the empirical evidence suggests that education makes you a better police officer. Police officers with 4-year degrees or higher have 40% less incidents of force, 40% less incidents of personnel complaints. They're less likely to be able to be indoctrinated. They're more willing to question the status quo. They're less likely to violate policy and procedures. That's what the evidence is. It's almost negligent for us in the United States to not heed what this data suggests, that we need to be requiring education. It's not that you can't be a good police officer without an education, but you're going to be a heck of a lot better one if you have the education. So that's what I'm promoting. Too often people want to conflict the difference between education and training. They're two different things. Training is being competent to be able to perform a certain task. Education is your outlook, your mindset, how you perceive the world around you. So that's the key here. So that's why I'm doing it. And that's why I think it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. What you mentioned there, opening up your mindset to learning, just creating that neuroplasticity, for lack of a better way to say it, of like looking at others' opinions and being able to have those conversations and appreciate other outlooks. And there's so much to it that comes from the education side of things that I don't think everybody thinks about, but that you brought up very valid points. And to throw another good statistic at you, so do what I do now, my licensed professional counselor degree, which required master's degree, you have to have 2,000 hours of post degree training to be able to get fully licensed. So like I didn't even know that it was 800 hours like that. And I just thinking of this too as you're speaking is like now the age, a lot of departments and agencies have dropped age of hiring as well too. So now you're hiring 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds who like into this job is just so much. So, man, it's a lot, but that is some really eye-opening statistics you threw out there for sure.
Yeah, it's It's really huge, and the reality is we need to be hiring people with diverse backgrounds, diverse experiences. Diversity makes us better. The studies all show that they demonstrate that. I know there's this huge argument about DEI has destroyed everything. I disagree. I've worked around men on the job that are absolutely worthless, and I've worked around women on the job that are unbelievable, and I would go down any dark alley with them. So, this argument that just because somebody has a certain skin color, is a one particular gender, that they're in their position because there's DEI is just nonsense to me. That's wasn't my experience during my 33 years. And the reality is this is where law enforcement needs to change its perspective on things. If you took any professional NFL football team and had nothing but their starting quarterback as the entire team, they could be the MVP of the league, but they're not going to win a game, are they? Because you need diverse skill sets. And that's what we need to be doing. We want to interchangeably take this person in this blue suit and this person in blue suit and have them do the same functions. Shame on us. We shouldn't be doing that. We need to be picking people that have the best experience, knowledge, and background to fill the specific various roles within law enforcement. Whether they should be filled with sworn personnel or civilian personnel is a whole nother debate. Why are we filling positions within law enforcement organizations that don't require 1 ounce of your training and experience in the academy or as a police officer? Why are we not opening that up to civilian employees, people that have the background, who have the expertise? And one of the biggest ones is dealing with the media. I mean, no law enforcement professional or executive has a training experience or by inclination to manage the media to the extent that somebody that has a number of years as a journalist working in the media understands. And the reality is we don't need a police captain being the commanding officer of media relations. We need somebody that understands the media. you know? So
Yes.
it's all these types of things. We in law enforcement, we put ourselves in a position to fail, which creates stress, which makes our well-being harder to manage. So we need to be looking at things organizationally, um, our our staffing models that we use from and how we train, who we hire, how we hire, all of those things. And I talk about all that stuff in my book.
Good. Yeah, I'm encouraging everybody to go out and pick up a copy of it on thin ice, and we'll make sure we have links and everything in the show notes so people can pick that up and also connect with you as well. But now's your time to shine. Give everybody a little bit of like the work you can do and what using your passion, your mission, like how can an agency use your resources?
Well, really, what I can provide any law enforcement agency is some insight into implementing what I call police managerial best practices. And what that does, it makes you much more efficient, makes you more credible, it makes you more likely to have optimal outcomes of critical incidents. At the end of the day, you're just more prepared to do the job that you have sworn to do to the best of your ability. And that's what I bring to the table.
Awesome. Well, I highly recommend you. I think you are spot on and excited to see the work that you do as well. But I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be on the show and to speak to the audience. And I know that people are going to walk away with a lot of things to think about and also inspiration as well. And as kind of we're calling for a full reform, essentially, of how things are done, and that way we can all like support one another and we can have really healthy communities and healthy departments and like the goal for us together. So thank you again so very much. But I'll give you a chance, any closing words or comments you want to leave to the listeners.
Well, listen, the one thing I would say is the reality is only about 20% of people have direct contact with law enforcement. So the remaining 80% of people form their opinions about law enforcement based on what they see and hear in the media. And listen, law enforcement officers, albeit not perfect, their intentions are pure and they are good people. And although There's people within the profession we need to root out, just like every career. But at the end of the day, law enforcement is doing what they can to make your life better, your community safer for you to live, work, and play in. And that's something that you really need to understand because it's a give and take. The police are the people and the people are the police. So it's a two-way street of respect. And if we acknowledge and recognize that up front, we'll make it easier for everybody.
Yeah, brilliantly said. Couldn't have said it better. Thank you again, Jeff, and you're welcome back on the show, of course, anytime that you want. So we'll make sure you get supported fully and get the book out there. And yeah, thank you again so much.
Well, thank you for having me.